Hello and welcome to the third episode of the URC Fanview series, a fan-led series recapping the season gone by for each of the four Irish provinces. Our focus tonight turns to Leinster, who were left reeling after successive defeats to Munster and La Rochelle, Freudian slip there, over the past fortnight. It was a gut-wrenching and bitterly disappointing end to the season for Leinster, especially in a home European final. With me to look back on the season are two Leinster fans and rugby personalities online. Firstly, I'm joined by a host of the Harpin on Rugby podcast, Jeff Pagano. Welcome on board, Jeff.
Okay, and thanks for the invite. Much appreciated.
No problem at all. And my second guest is our one-stop shop for rugby news and has some good opinions himself the odd time as well. It's RugbyKino, aka Kino Muller.
Thanks very much, Cian. Yeah, no, good opinions, not great opinions.
we all try to strive for greatness, but sometimes it just can't be helped. Isn't that it?
That's it. The journey that counts.
Yeah, that's it. But first and foremost, we'll start with the weekend gone by, and we won't touch on the game straight away. We'll go on the weekend, and it was a showpiece weekend in Irish rugby, getting to host a final for the first time in 10 years, and as we've said multiple times over the last 12 months since it was announced, it begs the question, why are we limited to one final a decade? So, to begin, do you just want to touch upon the festival atmosphere in the capital across the weekend and just the weekend as a whole? We'll start with you, Jeff.
Yeah, well, I mean, as we all know, there have been a lot of big rugby occasions in the Aviva in recent weeks, going right back to the last 16 match against Ulster. But as someone who went to all of them, this weekend was definitely different gravy when it came to the atmosphere. I mean, for one thing, most of the other matches, they weren't using the full stadium, but that wasn't the only thing that made these finals stand out. I mean, although I didn't make it to the Challenge Cup final, the reports I heard from around the ground, they make it sound like pretty much a slightly scaled back version of what we saw on the Saturday. So it was over the whole weekend. It wasn't just the sheer volume of people, because we've seen the Aviva full many times before, but it was also the mix, because although it did look like a load of Leinster fans were able to get their hands on tickets beyond those that were allocated, there was also a sizable amount of La Rochelle fans there too, bringing their color and all around, and of course in the stadium. But I was also keeping an eye out for all the different jerseys I saw in fans going to the match. And I noticed, Cian, you posted an even longer list of the different teams represented. And for occasions like this, I mean, that's a great thing to see. So there was a real party atmosphere walking up Lansdowne Road. And as I went to the Sandyman Hotel to meet up some of my Harpin and Rugby contributors, Kino included, you got to experience all the color and the noise and the crack going on, and including the welcoming of the team buses to the ground, all that stuff. And since I was lucky enough to have a media pass, I wasn't partaking in the old liquid refreshment. So maybe Kino can give us a sense of what it was like for those making a right proper day of it.
Yeah. I mean, there were certainly people making a day of it, all the way from all the way from towns, all the way through to Lansdowne Road itself. I managed to get to town by about midday. There were already people who were well into their libations and they're having a crack, and people from all over, like English clubs, Welsh clubs, everything, stags, fancy dress, everything, every kind of fan you could think of was represented on that walk in, and it was great vibes. It was really nice vibes. I was chatting to a couple of La Rochelle fans on the way in, and they were similarly kind of looking forward to it, a bit nervous. I don't think anyone was massively confident about this beforehand, other than maybe some kind of a beer-induced bravado flung at a distance by a shout across the road. I think that's about as close as it got. And inside the stadium was absolutely amazing. We got in there about an hour before kickoff, and it was just brilliant. I saw Jerry Thornley bemoaning the lack of atmosphere.
No.
I have no idea.
He was absolutely. I was sitting. I mean, I'm not name dropping here, but I was literally sitting. I could have reached out and tapped him on the back of the head, and I don't know what he was seeing. I mean, the every single call, like especially in that second half, but every bounce of the ball was getting cheers, and people were out of their seats, and there was emotion, and it was, you could see it right beside you there with the fans, but all around the ground. It was an amazing atmosphere, and the Leinster fans were definitely making themselves heard throughout. That's for sure.
Yeah, they really did. Like, and I was over, so you would have been in the West Stand is the press area, isn't it? And the East Stand is the other one. And I was over there, and the noise, like I was surrounded by Leinster fans where I was. Now, it was a weird one. I think So I got the weekend pass. I think most of the tickets around me were day pass because it was a very different crowd to the day before. But it was just such a good atmosphere. Like, and it was, to be fair, I think you could say from maybe the 60th minute on, it got pretty quiet, but that was just sheer tension. Like even myself, like, and again, like I wanted Leinster to win. I wasn't actively screaming, "Come on, you boys in blue" or anything. But like you're just sitting there and you're like, okay, go on, you go. Yeah, lay it off. Okay, back door up. And it's like you're quiet and you just can't get into it. It's just so tense. And like, listen, it made for a great weekend. You mentioned the jerseys, like half the French fans I met on the street were making some sort of comment, "Allez Munster, Allez Ronan O'Gara," or whatever. Apart from one Claremont fan who may have shouted "Allez Leinster" in front of me. But look, I thought we were all good between ourselves and Claremont, but apparently not. But getting into the day after, the Saturday, and the heartbreaking defeat. Most of us have watched it. It was an absolute epic, an absolute classic of a final. But it was unfortunately a Leinster defeat. So, Cian, we'll start with you. Do you want to take us through the game and just the key takeaways as Leinster fought short and bidding for that 5th star?
Just saying, you're going fast and loose with the word "wants" there.
Yeah, no, it's doing an awful lot of heavy lifting there.
Yeah.
Yeah, you enjoyed that final though, Craig. I mean,
I did.
You enjoyed it.
I did.
I mean,
yeah.
I thought we were friends. How could you do something like that to me?
If
I
had
didn't enjoy
pearls,
it
I'd be
for
catching
you.
them.
I'm sorry, that's it. This interview is over.
Nope, that's it. Gone.
All right.
Welcome back, Cian.
Only because there's a contract.
That worked better in rehearsal.
It works better in the video than it does in podcast. He actually just got up and left, guys, but he's back again. So, Cian, will you, by contract, take us through key takeaways of the game, because nobody wants to, apparently.
Yeah, Grant. Look, I'll get a better solicitor before the next time, and I'll see this one through gritted teeth. Yeah, look, if you were going to write a movie script for a final game, you couldn't do it better. It's for the 4-parter. You know, it really was a match of 4-part. The first quarter, everything for Leinster looked like it was going to according to plan. Looking to build up looking like the plan was to build up an early unassailable lead and then trust the defense and taking your threes or whatever opportunities became available to see it through. You know, they scored those lightning quick 3 tries in 12 minutes, and we were all absolutely leaping out of our seats. It was an amazing start. I don't recall ever seeing a start like that in a rugby match, let alone a final.
Possibly Ireland, Wales in this year's Six Nations, the only one I can compare it to.
Yeah.
And you know, a lot of people compared it to 2011 in Cardiff, but even that, the lead was built up kind of more gradually in the first half. Then this was just a lightning boom, boom, boom. First 12 minutes, like you said.
Even the comeback was different, wasn't it? Because that game, he kind of came back and had a 1 nearly in 10 minutes.
It was over. Yeah, it was over in the second half. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, and I mean that was off the back of 2 from Dan, 1 from Jimmy O'Brien. Yeah, the line out tries were beautifully executed. Obviously well worked. You know, they were off the paddy, off the paddock, off the training paddock, because those had obviously been worked quite carefully. And the battle on the gain line, the breakdown and in contact was absolutely fierce. It really was. Especially
that first 20 minutes. I know if you want to talk key takeaways, James Ryan going off is probably the biggest hammer blow, but by word was he smashing lads when he started that game.
Oh, for sure. So yeah, unfortunately, the first quarter is the bit I'd like to talk about. Now we get to the second quarter. The second quarter was when La Rochelle started to get their gears turning a little bit. We weren't clearing as well as we could. It was the kind of James Lowe's 50-22 was the last good kick from hand I think we had until nearly the end of the game. So they got 2 from Dante and Ryan Rodolfo, that HIA, and things really started to not go well for us. Sorry, I've got a dog under my desk here who's taking offense at something.
No problem.
that rolling on then, that try before before the end of the half, really did. Sorry, hang on, I'm gonna have to.
Yep, no other. Jeff, do you want to take us through that kind of second half? So just while Cian is working that.
Yeah. I mean, it was a game of a lot of there was a lot of pivotal moments in it. That's what makes this kind of level of match such a big deal. I mean, there were things that Leinster did that, like kicks, clearance kicks that weren't made that you would have gotten away with maybe at other points of the season. But it's just to show that this is essentially test level rugby, where you just can't afford to, your clearances have to be on point, every single factor of, and then like just going back to that first half for a second, there was a moment like where we got, not only did we get the third try, but there's also a yellow card that a man off the pitch, but making that a yellow card work. We were pinned back in our own 22. We tried to do a clearance, and Gibson Park threw a real knuckleball at Lowe. It just died just before him and knocked it on. And then that scrum, 2 resets, took 2.5 minutes off the yellow card. Just little things like that just made for it. And then of course, and one more thing about it is, like we were talking about our center pairing of Ringrose and Henshaw. Well, talk about being matched up, almost a perfect matchup of a different type of a center pairing in Dante and Satuni. They're just 2 different types, but they all displayed what they could do on the day. But in that first half, and when it came to the finishing, just the sheer finishing power, we saw what they could both do. I'll let Kino go back to what happened at the start of the second half.
Yeah, no, I think you've covered it really well there. It was kind of the Leinster defense did do well, but the cracks were showing at that point. It was just relentless carrying and absolutely amazing ball retention, and just on ball running game. Just kept going at it. And the defense was, I mean, there's amazing defense from Leinster in that third quarter, but you can't keep that up. I mean, the difference in tackle rates between the two teams by the end of the game is insane. You know, you can't be making 120 tackles more than the other team and expect to come out the right side of the game. And then that once it got to the fourth quarter, that's kind of really where that started showing, despite the substitutions we could make. We were low on energy. We weren't able to buy our way out of the half. And then they broke through in that 72nd minute. They just kept probing. They broke through. And we got a yellow card as well for just for good measure. Try to rally just at the death of it to try and get something out of it, but just weren't able to get it over the line. Unfortunately, Michael Alatoa got a red, which was absolutely fair, nailed on red. But effectively, the game had been lost in the 40 to 50 minutes before that. Just a failure to make our way up the field and be able to convert any kind of a position into points.
Yeah, I mean another point about the difference between this level of rugby and others is just like the sheer pressure La Rochelle were putting on us in their attack in that second half. Any other team would have buckled. I mean, you don't get points for keeping a team out for 30 minutes of a complete onslaught, especially when you can't clear the ball for love nor money properly. You keep basically inviting them back in at you, but to hold them out again and again and to be able to strip the ball at the point of contact again, which we were really experts at, like for most of this game, they'd really done their homework on just getting in and ripping the ball free. We got unlucky a couple of times. There was one time when Dan Cian did one, but it just went off a knee and got a couple of fly hacks, and they actually got a try on the back of that territory. But it was just, we just kept them out for so long. It's just that it was just the inevitableness. We couldn't, for love nor money, get possession, even to get their possession to be in their own half, just for a series of phases where we might have worked a penalty or do something. It was just the only time we got possession was after they'd kick a penalty and we'd get the restart. It was just an onslaught. And however much praise you'd want to give us for holding them out that long. It was inevitable, and then the yellow card came with it, and then there was a series of decision making, of course, in the final 5-10 minutes where we could say that we might have gone a different way to go for points, but we came damn close to a try there as well, like, you know.
Yeah. It's funny, actually. I came across one stat which I think kind of distills everything down quite well. From Opta, was based on the possession. They've got an XP mod, expected points per position, field position and possession. Their model expected La Rochelle to outscore us over the course of the game by 29.9 points to 25.5, and it was 27 to 26, so fairly accurate.
Yeah.
Their first half prediction was for 12.9 points for La Rochelle and 14.1 for Leinster. We actually outscored them 23 to 14, so we overperformed in the first half, really in that first quarter. All of the possession that we would have had in that first half, actually, we got more points, despite it almost all being in the first quarter of the game rather than the half. But by the second half, they had predicted that it would be 17 points to 11 in their favor, and it was actually 13 points to 3. So we underperformed in terms of the possession that we had in the second half, which just goes to show how little possession we had, how it was not only minimized, but it was all in our own half, and we weren't able to, whenever we were kicking, I can't understand our kicking strategy. We did not go for territory. We kicked the set through to the center. We kicked straight through to their back line. When we were kicking through to the center, we weren't getting someone up on it well enough. We weren't kicking contestables.
And that's something we've done well all season. Okay, kicking game has been, we've won loads of kicking battles, so it's not like we weren't up to it. It's just when the occasion came, we weren't able to. I mean, they're like, there's definitely no one thing you can point to that led to it. I mean, there was a whole variety of reasons. There were some in Leinster's control, like we're saying, like basic execution and decision making in the dying minutes. But there were others out of control, like just dogged determination from La Rochelle just to bring that narrow lead home once they forced their way to get it. So there was a lot of things in it, and like you say, it was a great match for the neutrals and the La Rochelle fans, but it was just tough watching for us.
Yeah, and listen, I think you've touched on nearly everything from, you know, James Ryan to the kicking game to the second half onslaught. And in reality, I think you could say that you could easily have had a game there where both sides exchange blows, as opposed to Leinster running up a score and La Rochelle coming right back. And it changes the narrative around it, because, you know, 17-point lead is the tagline that goes with it. But I think it's just one of those, like, Cian, you were talking about before we came on, like they've lost, their last 4 knockout games by combined 6 points, or what was it? 6, yeah.
6 points, the semi-finals and the finals in both competitions over this year and last year.
And it's nothing. But then at the same time, Leinster are rightly the kings in Ireland at the moment and in Irish provincial rugby. So not to have a major trophy it's a letdown, because they've been excellent. They've been sheerly dominant right the way through until May, and even at that throughout games in May in the last 2 years. So just with that in mind, really, and we'll come to you, Jeff, do you think Leinster have a slight point to prove next year now, because they haven't won a URC, they haven't got that 5th star, and they've done absolutely everything in their power to do it? Just a little bit of look, they should really have at least one trophy at the very least.
Yeah, I mean, you said it there. They've done everything in their power, because as you nicely reminded us earlier on, this was the 3rd year in a row our European journey has ended against this particular opposition. But as someone, you know, of course, follows Leinster week in, week out, I mean, I have to say, like, it's not for the want of trying that we've fallen short. You certainly can't say that all the talk was about our physicality going into the last couple of seasons. You can't say that hasn't improved over that time. We saw this especially on Saturday. Another way we've improved was by simply scoring tries at all against them. We couldn't even get one in Marseille. Well, this time we got, like you say, three inside, 12 minutes. just to touch on this thing, it's been debated a lot, and I studied that last 10 minutes, and I think one thing Leinster could do, it's a small thing, but it's an important thing. It's to have a drop goal option in the arsenal. The only way to do that for me, I mean, I'm not a coach, but for me anyway, is to do it more often during the season, so that you're used to the systems. And I've been saying it for years that Irish teams don't tend to go for them these days. A few notable exceptions like Johnny in Paris, and of course, I think there was one last week. I can't remember who the opposition was, but we, just
I can kindly remind you, but I won't. That'd be nice.
But it just wasn't even close to the radar for Leinster. I mean, there were times I was looking for the breakdowns when we could have gone for it, and there were definitely times when we could have. But there was no forwards going to set up a block. There was Gibson Park does what he does brilliantly, I have to say, getting quick to the breakdown and firing out to the next phase. But it's something that Leinster can develop. It's another thing they can work on for next season, because like you said already, when you look at how close our high profile defeats have been in recent seasons, an extra 3 points would have turned us into winners each and every time. So that's one thing anyway. I mean, they'll come in and do a lot of other things as well, but that's just one little addition that I would think would be an easy fix. Just do it more often throughout the season.
And just to jump in there, just briefly checking my notes while you were going through, by my reckoning, there's only been 2 drop goals by provinces this year. One was Jack Carty over against the Ospreys from long range, and of course Jack Crowley last weekend against yourselves. And like, it is a dying art, but there's always, like, when you're going up against a team like La Rochelle, who are menaces at the breakdown, it is important to have that in your artillery, as you were saying, to have it there.
Yeah, I mean, in the top 14, they do them in the first minute, especially if they're the away team. If they're a weekend away team, if they find themselves in the 22, they don't even hesitate. Boom, boom, drop over 3 points, and there we go. We're settled down and stuff. And I'm not saying we have to do that necessarily, but it's just to have it as a play, to have it as an option they can go to. They've got dozens of different options in their minds when they go out in the pitch. Just to have one more when everyone knows what they're doing. Set yourself up, get in position, boom, pop it over, and have the confidence to drop in the pocket.
You can't help but wonder if a drop goal is going to be Leinster's new tap and go, because obviously they were outdone by the tap and go against the Bulls last year, and maybe not going for a drop goal this year would have outdone them as well. And you maybe think that maybe that's what they're going to work on over.
Yep, that's a good point, because tap and go is another thing they've added to of course, we didn't get to see it in this particular match, but it's another thing they've added. You've seen a progress. It's not like we're at the same level we were 3 years ago. You've seen it week in, week out that they have worked on things. Just obviously need to go that little bit further.
Yeah. Cian, do you want to jump in? Is there anything you think Leinster can work on? Or?
Yeah, well, I mean, saying we're going into next season with a slight point to prove. I mean, wasn't that last season? It's starting to have a touch of the nobody beats Vitus Jerry latest 17 times in a row to us at this point. There's only so many seasons we can go saying it has to be different next season. But I mean, all you can do is, as a team, is kind of put yourself in the best possible position to try to win and try to ensure that you have the tools to do it. And I think adding tools to that toolbox is certainly a way to do it. Even then you can still lose. There's nothing stopping it. Like, you either smash teams out of it completely and there's nothing in it and there's no argument, or it's a game that's close enough to have gone either way. So I think maybe Leinster need to kind of prove to themselves a little bit more that they can do things both ways. The boring tri-fests and the dirty rolled up sleeves arm wrestles, I mean, back in the Joe Schmidt glory days, there were home and away teams almost to achieve just that. So maybe it's a bit of kind of spit and sawdust, roll up the sleeves and do it the hard way might be the way forward.
Every once in a while anyway, as opposed to, we got a red card against Ulster, let's beat them by 20 points. But anyways, that's more of a sign of Leinster's dominance. But if they are going to go a step further, be it in terms of trophies or in terms of their game plan, they're going to have to do it without Stuart Lancaster. And we'll come to you first on this one, Cian. Can you just give us your thoughts on the Lancaster year as a whole? Because there's going to be an awful lot of recency bias kicking in this week. But he has been a phenom in a lot of ways.
Oh, absolutely. Like, this is the horrible thing about talking about coaches, that it's much like politicians, you know, no coaching / political career ends without ignominy almost. And Stuart nearly managed it. So close. But to avoid directly referencing 2 weekends results, he's done an amazing job with Leinster. I mean, after one season coaching with us, Leinster won the double and then won the Pro 14 3 years in a row. That's unprecedented. Like,
yeah, the only team to go back to back, and hopefully will be the only team to go back to back in the league, providing Munster win on Saturday.
I didn't realize that would mean that. Oh God, that's an interesting correlation there.
But add that to all the others.
Yeah, that's another reason to root for. Yeah. The only reason to root for us, maybe. But anyways.
Yeah, I mean, even back then, even in the pomp of back-to-back Heineken Cups, we couldn't do Leinster couldn't do the double.
Yeah.
Another thing, he's brought on some amazing young players. I mean, I did a quick check of pre Lancaster and post. So players that hadn't debuted at all for the Leinster senior team at that time. And I picked the highlights because there's more. But Ryan Baird, Harry Byrne, Will Connors, Max Deegan, Keelan Doris, Kieran Frawley, Jameson Gibson Park, Hugo Keenan, Ronan Kelleher, Jordan Larmer, James Lowe, Michael Milne, Andrew Porter, James Ryan, Dan Cian.
We didn't start the fire.
That's actually a very good list. Okay.
And I mean, I know it's not all down to one man, but it's been pretty well acknowledged that he is a key person in bringing through young talent and developing young players. I mean, he's also given so much back to the Leinster branch grassroots. His coaching the coaches sessions are famous, and they are taken up by coaches from clubs of all levels. And they've been a huge part of trying to get a single Leinster way of thinking throughout the entire branch, and that has actually fed through, I think, into kind of the success story that Leinster is now. It's not all gold mercy days and stockbrokers
and demographics.
Well, I was trying to say demographics without saying demographics.
Fair enough.
I think we're all a bit tired of that word at this point. I think everyone regrets bringing it up.
Tell me about it. And I made as much jokes as anyone. I even, like when Nina Barr was announced we're gone to him now, I even made a meme about like, oh, Jesus, the demographics, Lancaster, nothing's going to stop them now. But Nina Barr is the man appointed to be Stuart Lancaster's replacement. First of all, what do you make of the coaching? As a coaching point of view, what do you make of the hire, Jeff?
Well, I think the most important thing we need to say about Nina Barr's appointment is that he was never going to be a direct replacement for Stu. This role of a senior coach was essentially created for Stu. And while it looks like that's the title Jacques is going to have, it still seems like it's got enough ambiguity and wiggle room for him to be able to define it the way he wants. Many have said he tends to operate better with the defense. So we could see a shift in the overall framework of the management ticket. I mean, that remains to be seen. But there's two more significant points about him that's going to help, I think, coming to Leinster. One, that he does have experience in the Irish system. So it's not like he does have to adapt to the whole calendar thing, because that is always a challenge for coaches coming over here. Not especially if they come out of the Europe, like the URC Pro 14 into that system. It's a different kind of year for clubs there, but also the Irish system as well is different. There's more camps, and you have to be able to adapt to the players you have at a time. So he's used to that kind of schedule. But I think more importantly, I really don't think he could have gotten a different personality with him at the top of the ticket than Leo Cullen when you compare him to Razzie. Now, just to be clear, I'm not saying one is better or worse. They're just very, very, very different styles of top ticket coaches. And Leo is more of a let you do your thing kind of kind of coach. He deals with the media and deals with in a different way, deals with the media and lets the senior coach do his thing. But it's an interesting dynamic. He's coming in, like you said, like Cian said, Stu is left a lot. He's left a good legacy. He's left a good framework, not just at the top level, but all the way down, a coaching philosophy through there. And it's all about how Nienaber comes in and adapts to it himself and puts his own stamp on it. So I look forward to seeing how it all pans out.
And it's probably worth noting because as the Munster man in the pod, like Nienaber was with Munster, and I think there was something. Obviously, Munster defended very well under him when he was defence coach. He was a big loss, replaced very well by JP Ferreira. But there was something about him that you didn't really know what exactly he was like. He wasn't this media personality that, say, Lancaster or any head coach would be. And even with his time in South Africa, like, let's be real, everyone remembers Erasmus's antics. No one remembers what Nienaber has said over the last 3 years. But I do think he's a very good coach. I do think he's a good hire as well. And just on it, Cian, because we get into the season gone by as we're going to try and do you think he will change Leinster's philosophy massively? Because that is a question that people at home will probably be asking, even if I don't see it myself. Or do you think it'll just be a case of, well, he's just going to have to fit in along with Goodman and Sean O'Brien and Cullen and their vision as well?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a matter of evolution rather than revolution. I think he will definitely want to put his own stamp on things, but it's going to be hard to convince the rest of the brains trust that a complete change of direction is the way to go. I think it's a recipe that seems to work really well for like 95-98% of games. So I think what's probably needed is something at the 2% end rather than the 98% end. I'd say there's a chance you will see probably a change to the defensive system. I don't know whether it's going to be a swing to a rush style defense rather than the blanket all in the line defense, because again that would have a knock on how the attack functions. So will we change from an off-ball to an on-ball team? I don't know if I see that, but certainly I'd see him putting his stamp on things, getting his personality and way of doing things. And yeah, we don't really know what it is, so maybe we might see a dancing Leo Twitter account yet, just to take the attention off him.
Oh God, don't get into that. Anyways, we you mentioned, and it's good you mentioned actually. You mentioned the 2% gains the Leinster have to make. Well, they won 16 out of 18 regular season European games, or URC games. Apologies. They won 4 out of 4 in the European pool stages. They obviously won, basically most of their games, really 95% of their matches this season. And it was that typical just breeze through. Like the Stormers in March was the first time you're actually given a proper game. Granted, there was a couple of interpros that were tight, but nothing, you can almost discount interpros as being their own separate thing. And I mentioned this on a previous podcast because it raises the standard. Like they're the best URC games of the season nearly at times. And just in general, because obviously Leinster blitz an awful lot of teams, score an awful lot of points. Was there any standout moments from that regular season? And then was there any standout players this year? And not just the new guys on the block. We'll start with yourself, Jeff.
Yeah, well, just before I talk about the moments, just one thing. I mean, we were talking about it on our pod about Leinster's season as a whole, and the one thing you just have to at least mention when you're talking about the season as a whole, especially this particular season, is the Six Nations, the Grand Slam, and how it factored into the season. I mean, you can't take, because it's a lot of the same players that are involved in those attritional weeks. You can't talk about the whole season without at least factoring that in. So I'm just mentioning that for now, that is right in the middle. And for one thing, you mentioned that Stormers game. That was the first game we didn't win, and that was the first game right after the Six Nations. It was 22 all draw. That was a great match. But anyway, talking about standout games. Well, early in the season, we had one of the challenges over the last couple of years has been beating the South African teams. There was 4 of them come in. We've still to beat the Stormers. we lost to the Sharks last year. So the Sharks came in very early in the season, came into the RDS. Johnny Sexton actually played that night. But it was an amazing match. And the Sharks were there. They were ready to play. They were running at our defense every chance they got. It was almost a reverse. They blitzed the early stages and took a lead, but we managed to come back. And the score, it was a 20-point, I think, win in the end, but that was due to a couple of late tries. It was actually a lot closer later into the match. So that was a great night at the RDS. But another one that I think it defined the opponent's season more than it defined ours, but there was the Ulster coming in to the RDS and also having a big lead. We had a red card and all that stuff. And we managed to turn that around. But that was a big night at the RDS as well. So there's the Kino will talk about other moments throughout the year. But do you want me to talk about players now, or
yeah, we'll just go to Cian for his standout
okay.
moments first, and then we'll come back to the big players.
Yeah, I thought the win away in South Africa against Lions was pretty special. They gave Leinster a tired enough time when they visited last season, especially in the scrum. Actually, getting a view up close of the Lions starting front rowers was something else. I've never seen legs that big on a human being. It was insane. It was amazing. And their scrum was absolutely brilliant. So getting the first win on African soil with the Reese Ruddock All-Stars was pretty memorable. Also the win against Toulouse in the semi-final of the Heineken Cup was probably one of the reasons why the final hurt so much, because it was comprehensive. Against a team I was worried about. But it's Toulouse. You do not take Toulouse lightly. And it was a very comfortable game in the end. So it was, it just felt at the time like there was another gear there to be had, but as it happened, La Rochelle had a plan for that. So such is life.
And is there any standout players for yourself? We'll go to you again, Cian, for this one first. Any standout players in blue this season, or not just breakout players, because obviously that's what we usually jump to, but just in general?
Yeah, no, I originally was going to kind of look at breakout players, but frankly, I couldn't stop thinking of two players who were not really could have once half a breakout player. Doris and Cian.
I knew it was going to be Dan Cian.
Well,
we all know Dan Cian.
Dan Cian's hard not to talk about. 12 tries in 17 matches, as many of them dancing around fellas as going straight through them. 9 clean breaks, 5 offloads. The man moves like a ballet dancer across at Linford Christie. Yet he's a I think 19 stone hooker. He's a large guy. Really, other than his scrummaging, I can't his darts improved as well. His throwing,
they really have
really improved, and I can only see them getting better if he starts getting better scrummaging stats. If he can work out his issues at the scrum with Porter, then I really can't see what he has left to make it better in his game. Outside of that, then Doris, he is also another player who's kind of tilting at those world best or world class player lists. He's 5.5 meters per carry in heavy traffic, with a carry every 7 minutes or so, across over 800 minutes this season, with a tackle every 6 minutes thrown in on top of that as well. Beats 1.5 defenders every time he plays 80 minutes, 8 per 80, 6 try assists as well in 13 games. And yet another player who absolutely dances, his ability, his footwork around contact, just for a man.
It's gone up a bit. It's even gone through another level, hasn't it? Because it's something I hate to say it, but it's something as a rugby nerd, when you kind of get bored, you start watching these things, and it's just he's so quick on his feet. We've seen that try, the Hugo Keenan try against France. Doris just gives that little shimmy, helps him get the game line, it helps quicker ball. These are small things, but they're big things, and it's something he's really improved upon. Yeah,
absolutely. So it's hard not to think of two players right now. Sorry for the younger lads.
The safest houses pick, but Jeff, do you have anyone in particular that you want to give a mention to?
Yeah, obviously there's loads of names I can go for here. We talked about how big a loss James Ryan was and how he's come on with his leadership and things like that, but they're kind of the top test level players. I think for my first name, I might just go beyond the quote unquote household test names in the Leinster squad. And just give a shout out to Ross Maloney. He's improved season on season. He's a true leader all around on the pitch, does a lot of the nuts and bolts work around the pitch. He's really, but he motivates. He's one of those second rows who goes up to the line out and tries to get the crowd motivated, try to harry the other hooker to throw in the ball, all those little things. He brings the physicality we've been asking for, and he thoroughly deserved his starting jersey for that final. But one extra thing about him, it's just his ever-present nature. I mean, Leinster were chopping and changing the squad. Everyone said how Leinster have used over 60 players, yet for Leinster's 28 matches this season, he's been involved in a whopping 23 of them, and way most of them have been starts. So I don't make this comparison lightly, obviously, but those are Leo Cullen levels of participation without test recognition. I mean, that's not to diss those players wearing green ahead of him at the moment. They've all earned their jerseys at the moment. There's no problem about that. Just that he deserves acknowledgement for just getting that nailed on starting role that he earned with all his hard graft. So just the big shout out for Ross there, that, you know, you don't see a lot of people talking about him. I suppose if I have to go for a back now, I might go for Jemison Gibson Park, because we've spoken about his there's a couple of clearances in the last quarter of the game. That's never been his game since he came here. When he came to Ireland, he was working for Joe Schmidt, and he tried to do a box kicking game. It's just not in his DNA. He's had to work a couple of years to be able to do that, and he has improved over the years. But we saw in those first 15 minutes just his speed to the breakdown and the accuracy of his passes, his quick decision making. I've always said about him, he's almost moving to the next breakdown before he's finished the pass from the last one. It's intense to watch, and it really throws the opposition game. So we saw it on Saturday, and obviously he was injured a lot this season. He didn't feature that much, but he came back at all the right times and he performed, and he just extra cemented his importance to Leinster.
And just going slightly off script, because obviously you mentioned Ross Maloney there, stand out with 20, I have it as 24 appearances or 23. It's close to it, much of a muchness. But a man on the opposite end is Johnny Sexton. Like, he only made 5 appearances in blue this year, probably his last season. Just to put it starkly, that means the 43 players would have played more games than Johnny Sexton this season. Well, that's just a random stat, but you know what I mean? Like, he did not feature an awful lot this year. Of course, wasn't involved in the final on the field, we should add. But obviously his legacy is a big thing. And we don't know whether Ross Byrne is the answer, Harry Byrne is the answer, Kieran Frawley or Sam Prendergast, or even Charlie Tector. But moving on from life after Sexton, assuming he does retire after the World Cup, which we're still not 100% sure, we have to assume he will. Is there anything do you think Leinster need to do to move on from Johnny? Is there, not just a 10, but in terms of leadership, in terms of day-to-day, or do you see him being back in the picture next year even as a coach? Go to you, King.
I don't know that you're going to see him as a coach anytime particularly soon. He's repeatedly kind of made it clear, and he actually that he wants to step away when he does retire, and he does actually work I think a day or two a week, as it has been outside of rugby in consultancy. So I mean, it is business, I think, that he wants to do, certainly in the short term. That doesn't always work out. Like, for every Ronan O'Gara who has a very clear plan of how they want to go about getting into their career in coaching, you have a Paul O'Connell who comes about it the long way around, and does an amazing job when they get there. But it's not for everyone. He has an amazing rugby mind, but whether or not he wants to, really, when it comes down to it, take on that role, because it is a very different role, and to have played at his level and to just transition straight into coaching, I'd imagine very, very difficult, especially within the same setup.
The only thing I'd add to that is like technically, I mean, with his personality, he's been a coach for the last 15 years. That's the way. That's the way he runs things. It's his party. It's his show. It's done his way, and he's an on-field, the classic on-field general type of thing. But like Kino said, it does. You know, the sound bites sounds like his interest is outside of rugby. I'm sure he'll stay in touch with the game somehow, but I suppose it's just a question of the plans in place for Leinster to replace him. I think they would have liked to get more games in the legs of Frawley, maybe playing at 10. He was just went injured at the wrong times. Of course, we still got the Byrne brothers. So the thing about Ross Byrne is that he's a type of player designed for a different type of team that plays a different way. But he's his entire career he's been coming in as a replacement driver for the Sexton machine, if you will. But he's done well. He didn't have a great day on Saturday, but he's done really well in his role to date. So, and then we saw just the fact that Sam Prendergast was named for that team for starting in both matches in South Africa, and how he especially performed in the first one of those games against a strong team that really put him under pressure, and he still showed the coolness under pressure in the final quarter, that he might have the kind of temperament to fill that role in the future. So there's a lot of options there for Leinster.
Yeah, and before, like, I know this episode has been a bit lighter on the season gone by, but given Leinster's aims and goals, their last games are worth 2 or 3 times what, say, Munster, Ulster or Connacht would be in the latter end. But before we finish, go back and look ahead to next season a small bit. We did get one question in about Leinster possibly looking at high profile signings in positions where depth is lighter. In my opinion, I don't think it's about the highest profile. I think it's about getting the right man for a job. Like even Scott Vardy, brilliant player and everything, but if you had said when he signed that he was going to be playing almost predominantly as a second row, you'd have kind of laughed, because he played quite a bit there. And like it's not always about the name, it's about what they do, and all these things is subject to IRFU discretion. So do you think I'm not going to say a change in tack of Leinster's NIQ signings, but do you think it is something that needs to be looked at if they are going to get to the next level? Granted, Jenkins, Alatoa, and Natai all played the Heineken Cup final. They were not sitting on the bench. They were not at home. But is it something that should be looked at if you're always trying to improve? We'll go to you, Jeff.
Well, it's definitely fair to say that the big signings are important, and you look at Leinster from years gone by, like you said, there's Scott Fardy, Rocky Elsom, Nathan Hines, all them. You could include Brad Thorne in there as well, though I'm not sure we really needed him in that particular season, but that's another debate. But like nowadays, while it's true that someone like La Rochelle, who are kind of the big nemesis at the moment, and they're able to make signings, they upgraded their squad, people like Hastoy and Satani and players like that. Leinster, it's a different setup. With Leinster, like you say, there's a bunch of prospects, they're coming through the system, so it doesn't leave a whole lot of room for big signings. So they have to be targeted in the right position that's not getting in the way of someone else's development. And I'd say, for example, maybe for the next World Cup cycle, if Michael Alatoa has to move on, and just let me be clear, despite that red card, he's done extremely well for us in his time at the province. But I'd say maybe we could do with maybe a quality experienced international tight head, just to give one example. But as good and all as the switch hitting we got from Porter and Healy has been, I think long-term planning is to be with more dedicated position players. So it's definitely something that Leinster can look at. But it's just the way we're set up, and we've got such quality coming through right the way through the squad that it does have to be targeted.
Yeah. And before I throw it to you, Cian, we should probably add that Michael Alatoa is the Samoan captain and Tyke Furlong is a Test Lion tight head. So this is what we're looking at when we talk about Leinster. But Cian, would you be in favour of not ripping up script again? Should talk about this. It's not that, but just maybe changing things if they are going to go over the line, because again, like Natai, Alatoa, Jenkins, they're good players. They're not the biggest names. But are they in that 2% bracket, as we talked about before, that will get you over the line?
We see, this is the thing. I'm not sure where you could point to in the Leinster team and go, that's where we need to sign a player who's better than the players we have.
That's very true.
Yeah, really, I think any signings at the moment are more kind of depth cover than anything. Leinster are currently, obviously, he, as things stand, to Irish team selection. So we can't really afford to be going, yeah, you might be an Irish starter, but we need someone better in your position. So we're going to hire a World Cup winner or something like that. It's like, it doesn't really scan. Frankly, I think possibly while there's such an imbalance in place, it would be kind of rather churlish for Leinster to be chucking a fit, looking for premium tier player recruitment when it's probably better off distributed more around the provinces. And we do need a few, just kind of, again, to fill in the gaps, kind of in and around managing Ireland player minutes. We might need someone at hooker, with Keller and Cian having a lot of Irish minutes on their clock, especially after the World Cup. Healy probably being gone at the end of the season. It's not been announced, but I can't really see him going on much longer. But Al Alatoa and Abduladzeh are still on the books for another year, both, and they're both now they're both NIQ, so I can't really see any leeway being given to us to get another in there. So yeah, shy of tearing up the rule book completely and getting a gigantic lock and a couple of bomb squad props, I can't really see the money being thrown at this as an issue at the player level.
Yeah, and that's, to be fair, when you were saying all that, the one position, scanning through it, the only position I kind of thought of was second row, really, because as good as Maloney's been, like James Ryan's going to be gone for large parts of the season. Personally, I don't think Jason Jenkins is the answer for Leinster, as much as he's a decent player, but I don't think he's the answer. But then at the same time, you've got Joe McCarthy coming through. You've got someone like Ryan Baird, who I think long-term Baird's future is at 6, but I think we can argue that in the URC level, he kind of slot in as a 4, that lighter second row option. And he did, memory's just gone blank, but he came on the back row on Saturday, if I'm right.
Yeah.
He replaced Conan. And that's nearly another side of it where, maybe they could, if they did have a bit more beef, they could have changed things up, but then you can't plan for someone like James Ryan, an 80-minute man, going off. So
yeah,
these are the small margins of it all. I assume if I ask you what you think is going to happen next year, you're going to say you're going to do the double, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, sure.
Might as well say what I said this time last year. I mean, it always works. It's always worth saying.
Yeah, after we win the World Cup, we'll go on and do the double.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's easy, and even though you'll have to wrestle the URC title off of Munster or the Stormers, I'll whisper that second part quietly.
It'd be great to keep it in the country for a couple of years. Do you know what I mean?
But especially after losing it out of the country. But listen, even myself, and like it's probably important as much as it is to hear a fan's point of view. It's important to hear an outside point of view as well. And even I did think Leinster were going to do the double this year. I won't lie. Like, I picked them last week to beat La Rochelle and they fall a point short. I did not think Munster were going to beat them, and they lost by 2 points. Like, they could well bounce back. The only thing is, as we know, typically provinces don't do well on World Cup years, but the URC is different to what the Pro 14 was. So we'll wait and see. And we'll leave it at that, lads. We've taken up enough of your evening. My thanks again to Jeff and to Cian for your brilliant contributions.
No problem. And best of luck next week to Munster, by the way.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. That's not great a cheat now. I can see it's not great a cheat. So that's good.
Genuine.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's good to see. And we will catch up with you during the World Cup, as Cian said, hopefully as World Cup champions, and during the regular season. Crossing all the fingers and toes. And thanks at home to everyone for listening. Depending on when you're listening, I might already have a special edition URC final preview podcast up on the channel as I chat to Jeff Neville, aka the Loosehead, to look ahead to Munster's first final in 6 years. No, wait, that's not right. I'm after getting that wrong. Sorry, first final in 2 years. I'm after getting it wrong with my own notes. That will go live on Wednesday with a written article preview up on the Friday before the final edition of URC Fanview to round off the series, looking back on Munster, which will come next week. So if you like what you see or hear, please do subscribe. You can find all the links to the channels below. But for now, Take it easy.